Hey, peace, peace. What's going on, everybody? So real here. Um, so I know that last time I went through a brief little intro into a very interesting discussion that I had, and let me tell you, I definitely did have a good time. Me and my other Christian brothers, we really enjoyed ourselves. What I can say is there is a reason why I personally believe that to this day, even though it's only been 2 weeks, that this discussion I'm about to show you guys in full. I'm not gonna play the entire thing, obviously, but only the parts that are gonna go ahead and show some really interesting things you might want to take note on. Is This discussion to this day remains unlisted. Unlisted. That means if you go ahead to the link in the description section, you'll be able to look at it. But unfortunately, if you go ahead to the let me see. Okay, good. Yeah, unfortunately, if you actually go to Inside the Nation Radio's YouTube channel, it's not there. And you have to question why it's not there. Now, if I was a host, I would think that perhaps because there was a lot of audio problems, which there really was, right? So, perhaps as a professional, you might not want to have that on your, list to look at things. Or is there more of a reason as to why? Yeah, it's really something to think about. And that's all I'm going to say. Um, I think the only other place I could think of where I saw something like this was ironically from Ron Shields, Divine Prospect. Me and him had two discussions, one informal, and then the second one was way more formal. The first one is on his playlist. The second one is not. Why? Well, you look at that discussion between him and I, and you tell me. So, without further ado, what I'm going to do is that basically this discussion involved gentlemen that I've never spoken with, maybe one spoken with, like, and I think that was like very recently, you know. Um, but these three gentlemen are people who believe that Jesus only died for Israel. So if you're out there and you run into some professing Hebrews that believe this, and perhaps this discussion right here um, will likely go ahead and put that to an end. That was my intention to put that type of belief to an end, and hopefully, that happened. I believe it did. There were things that we did not get to go through, which we'll go through in this video. So if you want to go ahead and have some notes to take down, I strongly suggest that you go ahead and get a pen and pad, type some things because you might want to take some notes for this one. Um, and so, of course, when it comes to Christians, we believe that Christ died for everyone. I tried to go ahead and tell the host weeks on that perhaps we should not do these two questions: what is salvation and who is salvation for? Because I told him that we would end up only focusing on one, which actually happened. Um, and I had some things for what salvation was from an Eastern Orthodox perspective, but once again, we were not focusing on that. I also ended up calling from the beginning of the debate that the subject of who is salvation for really would not be covered that much. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that for my opening statement. So, the first thing that I want to do right now is I want to go ahead and I want to read to you guys my original opening statement that I had. And this is a part where you can go ahead and take some notes because what you're going to see is that from a Christian perspective, you're going to see that we're going to go ahead and do a background, right? A premise. And then from there, there's going to be the Bible's context. And then after that, you're going to see which background and premise fits into or yields to the context in the Bible. That's what both of us were doing. So, from a professing Hebrew, they will go ahead and give a background and a premise of some kind of historical whatever, and that's fine. But then from there, they're going to try to go ahead and go into the Bible and show how the Bible actually points to, gives hint to, implies, or explicitly points out their premise, or does it point out ours? And that is a part where I believe that a lot of these conversations that have happened before on Clubhouse and on other places, I feel like this is a part where it really doesn't get much attention. What happens is, from my perspective, it seems like people point to whatever they want to point to. And then when it comes time to see what the Bible says about it, they simply read the text and simply insert in there what they believe. And people conflate that as evidence and proof. This video shows, or this discussion shows, that that's not how things go. You know, if you were to go and talk to somebody about how much the sky is blue, and they love how the sky is blue, and that's all they talk about, and from there they just love the color blue so much, then when we go to their house, we should see some kind of remnants of blue. For example, my wife, look, I got this blue couch right behind me. She loves the color blue, the sky blue, the ocean. That was a common theme of a color that we kept on running into shortly after we were married. So we said, you know what, let's fill our whole house with this color. Now imagine if a person that loves the color blue talks about it all the time, and then you go to their home and everything's red. Wouldn't that be a little difficult or kind of odd for them to, kind of say things about blue all the time, but yet you go to their house and it's red? Well, this is what you're going to see with the three brothers that I'm going to go ahead and allow them to go ahead and, say what they got to say. So I'm setting you guys up to see what it is that what I'm saying right now, I'm already calling it. So when you see it, you'll know that, they're not, we're not crazy. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read my opening statement here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and share it on screen real quick. Let me share it on screen. All right. Because I think that's very important. John McDermott, hey, what's going on? Would be hypocrisy. Yeah, that definitely would be. By the way, if you guys have this link, I encourage you, share it. Share it with someone who struggles with identifying who the Gentiles are, because we're going to show how these arguments are just flat. Get your notes. So let's go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to go ahead and for the opening statement here. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is because the host only allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement. Yeah, kind of odd, I know. But nevertheless, that's what he did. This is my full opening statement that I never got to go ahead and go through. I want you guys to tell me what you think. Matter of fact, let me just take myself off the screen. I don't even need to be seen at this point. Here. Oh, goodness. Obviously, I have not done this for a while. Oh, there it is down there. Okay, here we go. Who is salvation for? Titus 2:11. For the grace of God has appeared to bring salvation to all people. Whether it's who was the new covenant made with, who Jesus died for, who he gives as food for his body and blood for, John 6. Who can become the children of God, or who believes or has faith, or who is baptized, all speak of these things at best as specific, but none speak of these things as exclusive. Let me give you an example. I love my mom. I love my mom very much. I always talk about how I love my mom. Or I love my wife. I love my wife very much. I always talk about how I love my wife. Do I only love my mom? Do I only love my wife? No, I was focusing on someone whom I love, and I was speaking about that person. I didn't exclude anybody. You see that? Not a one Today, some professing Hebrews have chosen to adopt a refuted argument. They say salvation is only for Israel. The Puritans, before 300 years ago, say Christ only died for the elect. Professing Hebrews had the harder case, seeing that Gentiles such as Clement have received salvation, being described in Philippians 4:3 by Paul as, quote, whose name is written in the book of life, or in the Lamb's book of life. Clement, Bishop of Rome, earliest church father and succession of the Apostle Paul, writes as early as AD 70 to the Christian church and other churches. Any Calvinist today would point this out to them and easily refute this most recent heresy. Taking into all account of the things Jesus said about the Jews and the Gentiles, you get only one narrative. Jesus, in his earthly ministry, focused salvation primarily to the Jews, and later, primarily through his disciples, to the Gentiles. This is why Peter said to the Jews in Acts chapter 3, quote, the gospel was given to you first. This is why Paul says in Romans 2, first to the Jew, then to the Greek. This is why John says in his gospel, he said, quote, he came to his own, but his own received him not. But to those that did receive him, to them he gave authority to become the children of God. This talk of distinction is repetitive, as it should be. John also said that John the Baptist was not that light, but came in order that he would testify about the light that was Jesus, the true light, who gives light to every person, anthropos, human being, who was coming into the world. In other words, every person that comes into the world somehow is given some kind of light, whether it's a light of conscience, of good and evil, some light that eventually leads you toward God somehow. You got to go and make a choice. Like, that's what that light is. Why on earth would this light be given to every human being? But yet Jesus did not die for every human being. If the apostles teach that Jesus came to the Jews first and then to the Gentiles, and why can't we see that salvation is for everyone? Because they believe Gentiles are lost Israelites. It's the topic behind the topic. When refuted, the talk is over. The claim originates from the Maccabee accounts here. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 10 through 15, 37 through 39, and 47 through 53, they quote, made a covenant with the heathen, did after ordinance of the heathen, right? This is about, 150 years or maybe even more or less before Christ was born, during the time of the Maccabees when the Greeks took over Jerusalem, Antiochus, right? Did after the ordinance of the heathen, built a place of exercise of Jerusalem. Remember, these are the Israelites during this time who decided to say, hey, you know what? Forget about this Judaism stuff that my parents raised me on. I'm going to go ahead and become a part of the bigger corpus of whatever the Greeks are doing around the world in the polises, which are cities. And we're going to go ahead and adopt that way of life, even if we have to give up our religion, our culture, Judaism, even if we have to give up all that, circumcision. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. And so this is what the writer of Maccabees is narrating about what these interesting Jews have done. They built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, right? Gymnasiums, right? Gym, I believe that means naked in the Greek. Made themselves uncircumcised, running into covenantal stuff, forsook the holy covenant, you see, and joined themselves to the heathen. So, quote, the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. So we can see that there's a distinction between the inhabitants of Jerusalem who kept the faith and them who did not keep the faith. Keep that in mind. And joined themselves to the heathen, so the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them, whereupon the city was made a habitation of strangers and became strange to those that were born in her. They also left their children uncircumcised and made their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. And you know what? I'll actually stack the professing Hebrews position by adding to this. Notice that the word soul was there. That's very similar to what's seen in Genesis 17. God said to Abraham, hey, when you make this covenant with me and I make this covenant with you, if any of your male children are uncircumcised after the 8th day, that soul shall be cut off from his people because they've broken my covenant. So you can see that this whole covenantal thing, you were cut off if you didn't keep it. It became strange to those that were born in her. They also left their children uncircumcised and to make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. And notice it says that they became strange. Why is this important? Because this is one of the texts that they constantly use to say this is where the Jews or the Israelites or the Northern Kingdom or whatever became Gentiles. This is just one of the many texts. To the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. Lastly, 2 Maccabees 6:6 says, quote, neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath days or ancient fasts or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. Sounds compelling until one realizes that most of their position rests on the beginning of the Maccabee story. So what about the middle of the story? What about the end of the story? And what were those wicked Israelites called throughout the story? Gentiles? In short, no. The faithful Israelites killed rebellious Israelites. Other times, they rejoined the people in the armies of Israel, but were never identified as Gentiles. Neither did they call themselves Gentiles. Instead, these rebellious Israelites were called ungodly men, 1 Maccabees 6:21. Wicked men, 1 Maccabees 9:25. Certain pestilent fellows of Israel, men of a wicked life, 1 Maccabees 10:61. Ungodly persons who hated their own people, 1 Maccabees 11:21. Certain ungodly men of the people, 1 Maccabees 11:25. Menelaus, that traitor to the laws and to his own country, 2 Maccabees 5:15. In 3 Maccabees chapter 7 verses 9 through 16, they were called, quote, polluted Jews. Notice so far that not one time have they ever been called Gentiles. 1 Maccabees chapter 15, verse 1, 5 through 9, 15 through 24. What does it say? The summary is the Jews became exempt from taxes and tribute to the former kings by Antiochus himself. They also were given the rights to 1, make their own currency, 2, have all debts canceled, 3, own their own weapons apart from the state. So, like I said, I did my research on all this stuff. Now, there's a nice good nugget of it that does come from Beatrice Wells. She was the one that gave me a nice little head start to some of this stuff. From there, I continued to just plow through the rest of the Maccabees, and I found even more stuff. Rome protects and supports the Jews, urging many countries to do no harm to them. A Jew who betrayed their people were ordered by the king to be handed over to the priests to receive the due punishment according to the law. These edicts came in the form of a letter given to 4 kings and 19 countries that surrounded Jerusalem. That is all found in 1 Maccabees chapter 15, verse 1, verse 5 through 9, verse 15 through 24. What is the problem here? So far, they go out of their way to identify these rebellious Israelites, not as Gentiles, but as Israelites. Do you see the problem here? Yes, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I might as well say this right now. What I'm going to say is, oh yeah, grace and peace, bro. Hey, grace and peace. I see you in the chat. What I'm going to say is that their conclusion is because of what they read in the first part of the chapter. What I read all up above there deep in the beginning. They draw the conclusion that, hey, this is why they became known as Gentiles in the New Testament. But what's the problem? I'm reading here the words of the Jews themselves, and they are not painting that picture. Matter of fact, they're painting the opposite, which means they would have to give up their conclusion simply by the very text that they use to substantiate their conclusion. And I'm not even done yet. This is why this view is novel and it does not exist. In 2 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 26 to 29, Nehemiah's prayer reveals that the Jews desired all Israelites abroad to be freed out of slavery and to punish those that oppress them. This idea, the idea of Jews who abandoned their God and people to the degree of being called or considered Gentiles, are entirely absent. Interesting. In 2 Maccabees chapter 2, verses 19 through 23 is an excerpt from the author's preface. Yes, the one who wrote Maccabees here, or at least the 2nd Maccabees, actually wrote a little preface before he started jotting down the story. You know, a preface is saying, hey, this is what I'm all about. This is what I believe. This is what you're going to hear. That's what a preface is. This guy writes a preface. And it's an excerpt from the author's preface. The claim of, quote, Israelites called Gentiles is absent from the highlights and narrative of the book. This is why the New Testament bears no such idea, not even implicitly. Now that this is out of the way, we can move on to the New Testament and see who salvation is for. Or can we? Now, before I go ahead and go through all the questions, everything else I got going on here, what we're going to do now is I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to go ahead and show you just some clips. We're going to go through a little bit of stuff in these videos, all the, you know, the meaty and chunky stuff, all the important stuff. Now that you see the narrative from the Christian standpoint, that Gentiles are Gentiles and that Jews are Jews, and that this idea that Jews are Gentiles is totally false. Now we're going to go and hear from them, because according to them, this is not the only text that they use. So let me go ahead and get up the video, and just keep in mind the premise and of course their premise, so that way you can compare when it's time for us to go right into the word. So let me go ahead and share this real quick. Okay, here is the unlisted debate here. All right, and the first part we're going to go to is, and where is those timestamps? I'm getting the timestamps real quick. Okay, 28 minutes. Here we go. So we're going to put this at 28 minutes. 27:55, that's good. All right. And we're going to let this play. I want y'all to listen up. So, because of what I said in my opening statement, he chose not to say anything about the Maccabees, and he went to another place to substantiate this idea that Jews were scattered so much that they became the Gentiles that were evangelized in the New Testament. He has another place to prove that, supposedly.
So these are also people who are being scattered abroad, getting put away from the actual commonwealth of Israel, from the people of Israel, and they're getting put away. Did not Christ come for these people so they can come back to who they are? Okay, let's go to Nehemiah chapter 13 and verse 23. In those,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Hittites.
Yeah. It ended at 28. I'm sorry. I'm going to let him go to Ezra chapter 9, where he gets this idea.
The Perizzites, the Jebusites, and the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken of their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Yea, the hand of the princes and the rulers have been chief in their trespasses. Now let's jump to chapter 10. Look at this, right? We could go right here, 10 and 3. I just want to get straight to the point, right? It says, now therefore, let us make a covenant with our God to put away all the wives and such as are born of them. Now, according to Numbers 1 and 18, according to the book of Ezra, chapter 2, verse 59, what would you see here? The people who are also getting put away are not just the wives, children who are coming from these Israelites that are Israelites. So these are also people who are being scattered abroad, getting put away from the actual commonwealth of Israel, from the people of Israel, and they're getting put away. Did not Christ come for these people so they can come back to who they are? Okay. Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 13 and verse 23. In those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab, and their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. Now, these are things that also have to be, this is way before this happens in the book of Maccabees. So no, it's not just the people that were under Greek captivity. We have been spread apart. One more point, and then I got you. Cool? Okay. Now, this is a book you should get, Surreal, and everybody.
I'm going to pause it right there because we're going to get to that book in a second. And what I'm about to reveal to you about that book might make you very, very angry. So, first thing I want to say is that notice what his position is that he is saying that in Ezra chapter 9 and in chapter 10 and in Nehemiah chapter 13, remember, Ezra and Nehemiah were two individuals that basically came back to Jerusalem to go ahead and rebuild the temple, right? The people came back to Jerusalem. They were delivered after 70 years of being in Babylonian captivity by King Nebuchadnezzar. And it was Cyrus, king of Persia, who basically conquered Nebuchadnezzar and took all the Jews back to Jerusalem and funded them to rebuild the ancient waste cities and rebuild the temple. Ezra was a priest. Nehemiah, he's more of a governor guy. And so we have their writings of what happened when they all came back. He's saying that, according to the story, that there were guys who started to take on some Gentile wives and had kids with these Gentile wives. And in chapters 9 and 10 of Ezra, Ezra yells at them and says, hey, what are you doing? We just got back from Babylon for doing stuff like this. Put those people away. So they put their wives and their kids away. They sent them away, right? Could have been 10,000, could have been 500,000, could have been 200,000, could have been 100,000. We don't know. But when they did that, this brother is saying that those little remnant of people right there were the ones that when they went out so much all into the ancient world that basically they grew so enormous. This is what he literally is saying, that they grew so enormous that they became the Gentiles that the disciples and everyone evangelized in the New Testament. That's what he's saying. Now, that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? So what I want to do right here now is I want to go and share my screen, because this is the true background of the history of what he's saying, which basically trumps what he is saying. So I'm going to go ahead and share this here. And we're going to go back and share. I'm doing a lot of sharing, I know. All right. So what I decided to do is I decided to put together a little something that I noticed when they go to all these texts. So I went to the same texts that they went to, and I drew out more of the story. The whole thing is that it's this. When those people came back, and they're all multiplying in land, and yet those guys sent out their wives and their sons and daughters who they, had all these kids with who are these Gentile heathen people. he is saying that they were prophesied to go and be like that. They often like to go to Hosea and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezra and Nehemiah and every other prophet in the Old Testament to say, hey, the northern kingdom was so scattered that by the time that you get to the New Testament, that the northern kingdom are the Gentiles of the New Testament. And that is what happened to the northern kingdom. That is what he is saying. I want you guys to compare that right there of what he said to what the Christians here are about to say about what happened with the northern kingdom. So, obviously, it's going to be a pain to read it like this, right? You guys aren't going to want to read it like this, no matter how much I put it together. So what I decided to do was I decided to go ahead and put it over here like this for you. I figured this is so much better. Now, this is basically what it is about, okay? I wish I could go ahead and give you guys a timeline. I should have did that. When you look at Hosea, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the rest, all of them, they do talk about the northern kingdom. Now, some of them talk about the southern kingdom, but, we're going to focus on the northern kingdom here. We're going to show you what happened. It says, the northern kingdom were referred to as lost sheep, scattered by the Assyrians, returned to Judea with the southern kingdom, right, after the Babylonian captivity, and were called lost by Jesus, 700 years, 600 years later, as a distinct group from the Gentiles, according to Matthew 10, 5, and 6, and were preached the kingdom by the apostles during Christ's earthly ministry. Therefore, the northern kingdom are not the Gentiles of the New Testament. That is my position. And so now I'm going to go ahead and prove it right now. This is a prophetic timeline, comes from certain scholars. It says this here. Amos, he's around like the late 700s. Hosea, he's the late 700s. Isaiah, he's mid 740s. Micah, same thing. Notice these guys are contemporary. These four prophets were active during the 8th century BC. Assyria would be the world power eventually in this time. Isaiah prophesied in the southern kingdom of Judah, while Amos, Hosea, and Micah prophesied in the northern kingdom of Israel. So now when we go to the writings, we're going to see who they're talking to and how they talk about them. Their ministries overlap during the reigns of Kings Uzziah of Judah and Jeroboam of Israel. It comes from Marvin A. Sweeney in his work. When it comes to Jeremiah, Zephaniah, and Habakkuk, these three prophets were active during the late 7th and early 6th century BC. Babylon would be eventually the world power at that time, primarily during the reign of King Josiah of Judah and the subsequent period leading up to the Babylonian exile. Comes from Robert P. Carl's work. So let's see what this narrative says about the northern kingdom and what actually happened to them. This is Hosea chapter 3, verse 1. And Yahweh said to me again, go, love a woman who has a lover and is committing adultery, just like the love of Yahweh for the children of Israel. But they are turning to other gods and love raisin cakes. Definitely sounds like Northern Kingdom. That's Northern Kingdom. This is chapter 9. Do not rejoice, O Israel. Do not exult like the nations. For you played the whore, departing from your God. You loved the harlot's wage on all the threshing floors of grain. Threshing floor and wine, and that will not feed them. And new wine will fail her. They will not remain in the land of Yahweh. But Ephraim will return to Egypt. And in Assyria, they will eat unclean food. Notice that the prophecy is that the northern kingdom, Ephraim, and by the way, Ephraim was the biggest tribe. And just like people talk about Jacob, who represents the southern kingdom, they'll talk about Ephraim, who represents the northern kingdom. So they're using these names typologically to represent all 10 tribes, just like they did with Jacob. And in Assyria, where they would eat unclean food. Now, we do know that what happened. Now, we all know that the Assyrians came in and they ransacked the northern kingdom. They scattered them and took them all away. And yet, Hosea is prophesying this. Then you have 14 through 17. Give them, O Yahweh, what will you give them? Give them a miscarrying womb and dry breasts. Every evil of theirs began at Gilgal. So I began to hate them there because of the evil of their deeds, and I will drive them out from my house. I will love them no more. All their officials are rebels. Ephraim is stricken. Their root is dried up. They shall not bear fruit, even if they give birth. I will kill their cherished offspring of their womb. My God will reject them because they did not listen to him, and they will be wanderers among the nations. Notice that there's a distinction between these wanderers and the nations. That's the same distinction that you find in Matthew 10, 5, and 6, right? Do not go by way of the Gentiles, and don't go into the Samaritans and enter their towns. Instead, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So in Hosea here, there's a distinction between these scattered people, these wanderers, and the nations. That's a distinction. Same one you find with Jesus. That's consistent. Let's keep the story going. Hosea 10. Ephraim was a trained heifer that loved to thresh grain, and I myself spared not the fairness of her neck. I will make Ephraim break the ground. Judah will plow. Jacob must still till for himself. Notice that they're talking about the northern and southern kingdom. They're talking about them distinctually here, and this is going to repeat. Let's continue. Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap loyal love. Break up for yourself fallow ground. It is time to seek Yahweh, so he will come and rain righteousness upon you. You have plowed wickedness. You have reaped injustice. You have eaten fruits of lies, because you have trusted in your strength, in the multitude of your warriors. There's another one. So notice that one made a distinction between rebellious Judah and rebellious Israel. They're both in rebellion here. Both being rebuked. He will return to the land of Egypt. Oh, he says it again. And Assyria will be his king. Now, the reason why I do believe he's using this figuratively is because if you look in Isaiah 11, the Septuagint version says that God will make a road out of the way into Egypt, back into Jerusalem, to go and bring the people back on dry land. Just like they were brought by dry land into the promised land, right? You look at the Masoretic version of Isaiah 11. What do you find? It says, and I will make a road out of Assyria, and you will come on dry land back to Jerusalem. So notice that Assyria is being used as a type of Egypt 2.0. This is how strict they're talking about with them being punished by being scattered to Assyria. It says this: Assyria will be their king, because they refuse to return. The sword rages in the cities. It consumes his false prophets and devours because of their plans. My people are bent on backsliding from me. To the Most High they call. He does not raise them at all. So you could see that when it came to Hosea, they were acting up. Hosea was told to marry a harlot. He said, look, just like they have rejected you, you know what, your harlot has rejected you, my wife has rejected me. That's what he's saying. Saying, you know what, you're no longer my people, and this and that. That was what Hosea was saying. But notice that Hosea was saying, you know what, your punishment will be that you are going to be scattered in Syria. And he wrote during the 800s and late 700s. We know that the Assyrians came in during the 600s. So hundreds of years later, this actually happened to the northern kingdom. They were scattered. So that's what the picture paints so far. Now I want you to follow me, because once I start to show you this stuff, it's going to go against their narrative. Let's see what happens in Chronicles. Chronicles is during the time when, they're starting to be scattered. I read about it, and there were multiple deportations. So this means that there were already some who came in by, the kings of Assyria, Sennacherib, and were scattered, but not all of them yet. I believe that because this Chronicles here is basically a middle ground. But look what happens here. 2 Chronicles 34, 6-9. And in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and as far as Naphtali, in their ruins all around, he broke down the altars and the Asherahs and crushed the idols, grinding them to dust. He cut down all the incense stands in all the land of Israel. Then he returned to Jerusalem. Now, I believe this is either talking about Hezekiah or Josiah. Now, memory serves that Josiah did lots of things like this. The boy king of Israel, he did lots of stuff like this. He wanted to wipe out all the idolatry of the north, and it's ironic this is what he's doing. So, it says here, now in the, no. I'm supposed to go to, verse 9. Now in the 18th year reign, after he had purged the land and the house, he sent Shaphan, the son of Eliziah, Maziah, commander of the city, and Joah, the son of Joaz, the recorder, to repair the house of Yahweh his God. And they came to Hilkiah, the high priest, and gave them money so that he brought for the house of God, which the Levites, the guardians of the threshold, had gathered from the hand of Manasseh, Ephraim, and from the whole remnant of Israel, and from all Judah and Benjamin and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. In other words, this king went to all those places, northern kingdom and all, to collect tithes for the priests. This is what they were doing in their partially scattered, partially there state. They're still getting down. Paints a whole different picture, doesn't it? So this chapter lays out the ceremonial endeavors of King Hezekiah, who sought to celebrate the Passover by inviting all the tribes scattered abroad in his day. An important note to acknowledge is that the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh were used as a synonym for the northern tribes. And you can see that in Isaiah and Hosea's writings. I'm going to go to 2 Chronicles 30, verse 1. Look what it says. Then King Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah. Notice again the distinction, just like you saw in Hosea. And he also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh to come to the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem to make a Passover feast to Yahweh, the God of Israel. The northern and southern kingdom at this point of this rough patch in their life are still keeping the Passover. The north is coming to the south to keep the Passover at the temple in the south where God said that they had to go. That's what's going on. So the north is coming into the southern kingdom. And you're going to see that when it came to the Babylonian captivity, the northern were in the southern kingdom, which means they got scattered by Nebuchadnezzar, and they all returned according to Jeremiah and especially Isaiah. You don't believe me? Keep following. We're just going to keep going to scripture. This is a narrative so far. You can see that the northern kingdom narrative that the professing Hebrews are giving you is slowly breaking down as we go throughout this Old Testament narrative to see what the heck happened to the northern kingdom. So now, to rub it in even more, we're going to go to Jeremiah. Now, of course, I'm not going to read all 23 verses. No. I'm not going to do that. Okay. It certainly doesn't describe a remnant. That was funny. So let's see what Jeremiah says. Now, I'm only going to start at verse 21, but I encourage you, please read this entire chapter. That's what it says. Let's start at verse 21. Let's start at verse 20. However, as a wife departs treacherously from her lover, so you have dealt treacherously with me, O house of Israel, declares Yahweh. A voice is heard on the barren heights, the weeping of the pleas for mercy of the children of Israel, because they have perverted their way. They have forgotten Yahweh their God. Return, O apostate children. I will heal your backsliding. Look, we come to you, for you are Yahweh our God. Surely an illusion comes from the hills, the turmoils on the mountains. Surely in Yahweh our God is the salvation of Israel. So notice here that there's this cry to return, right? The Israel, they want them to return. But you know what? There's something else that I found in here. Look at this. I'm going to start at verse 17. Tell me what you notice. At that time, they will call Jerusalem the throne of Yahweh, and all nations will be gathered to it, and the name of Yahweh to Jerusalem, and they will no longer go after the stubbornness of their evil heart. In those days, the house of Judah will walk along with the house of Israel, and they will come together from the land of the north to the land as that I gave and as an inheritance to their ancestors. What did you notice? Jeremiah said in plain English that Israel and Judah, notice he's talking about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. He's speaking distinctually. He says they're going to come hand in hand, walking together out of the land of the north. And we all know contextually that the land of the north was always talking about an enemy land into what? The land of the inheritance that was given. Now, isn't that interesting? So he's saying that the northern and southern kingdom is going to go ahead and return. Now, if the northern and southern kingdom return together, then that means when you get to the New Testament, there's no such thing as a scattered, lost Israelites called Gentiles. They don't exist. They returned. They came back together. Look at Jeremiah 50. Look at this. The word of Yahweh spoke concerning Babylon, concerning the land of the Chaldeans, by the hand of Jeremiah the prophet. Declare among the nations and proclaim, and lift up a banner, proclaim. You must not conceal it. Say, quote, Babylon is captured, Bel is ashamed, Merodach is filled with terror, her idols are ashamed, her idols are filled with terror, for a nation will come up from the north. Once again, it's always some antagonizing nation from the north, right? And this time, in this context, that north is the Persians. It will make her as a whore, and as an inhabitant will not be in her. From humans to animals, they all will wander off and they will go away. In those days and at that time, declares Yahweh, the people of Israel will come, they and the people of Judah together, weeping as they go. They will go, and Yahweh, their God, will they seek. They will ask the way to Zion, turning their faces there. They will come and join themselves to Yahweh by an everlasting covenant. Sounds a lot like the Babylonian exile, doesn't it? Except the only extra plot twist to it is that Judah and Israel are getting out of Babylon together. Now, why is he saying this for the second time? And Hosea also said this and prophesied this as well, that they will go ahead and be scattered together. And yet they'll come back together. Interesting. They will come and join themselves to Yahweh by an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. My people have become lost sheep. Interesting. So, Judah, along with Israel, who came back weeping as they go, asking, where's the way to Zion? Coming out of Babylon, being delivered from the Babylonian captivity and all that, are weeping as they go, and they're saying, where's Zion? And Jeremiah looks at that picture of both of those people and says, my people have become lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. So being lost is in context of what the shepherds did. If the shepherds lead you astray to the point where you out there on your own, then that means the context of you being lost means that you're shepherdless. You're lost sheep. You have no shepherd. That is why you're lost. Therefore, the solution is not to wake up and know who you are. It's not to wake up into your head. No. The solution, according to scripture, according to cultural context here, is for you to go back under a shepherd. I wonder who the shepherd was in the New Testament. Who was it, guys? Was it that guy that called himself the Good Shepherd? Who was that guy? Let me go and continue. I don't know. Maybe I don't know anything. From mountain to hill they have gone. They have forgotten their resting place. You know what? That sounds like what he said in chapter 3. How the Israelites looked to the mountains and the hills and all those places where the idols and the false gods come from and said, no, your salvation isn't going to come there. Your salvation is going to come from Yahweh. Jeremiah 3:23. He's repeating himself. All those who found them have devoured them, and their foes have said, we are not guilty, because they have sinned against Yahweh, the true pasture, even Yahweh, the hope of their ancestors. Flee from the midst of Babylon and from the land of the Chaldeans. Go out and be like goats before the flock. For look, I am stirring you up. I'm going to bring against Babylon a contingent and great nations of the land of the north, right? The Persians. And they will draw up the battle formation against her. And there shall be captured. Their arrows will be like a warrior who have achieved success. He does not return without success. So we already know what's going to happen to Babylon, right? They're going to get ransacked by Cyrus the Persians. Then after that, 17 to 21. Israel is a sheep scattered. So the northern kingdom is being called sheep scattered this time. Last time was north and south, but this time it's the north. Israel is a sheep scattered. Lions drove them away. The first who devoured it was the king of Assyria, and now at the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. In other words, Jeremiah is saying that the northern kingdom are lost sheep. They were lost and scattered by the Assyrians, and they ate them up. And also now at the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, they've been scattered too, and he ate them up too. This is what Jeremiah is acknowledging of what's going on with the northern kingdom. Let's see what else happens in this story. Let's follow the story. The king of Babylon gnawed its bones. Therefore, thus saith Yahweh of the host of Israel, look, I am going to punish the king of Babylon and his land, just as I punished the king of Assyria. Oh, just one moment. Let me go ahead and plug this in because I am losing power. Just a second. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Okay. If anyone is there, I need you guys to do a test. If I can be heard and everything is still going, I need you guys to type in the chat. Yes, we can still hear you. Yes, we can still see you. Once again, I need someone to tell me, can I still be heard? Can I still be seen? Yes or no? Because unfortunately, I lost power, but I want to make sure that I'm still live and able to be seen because my computer had cut off. Okay, for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that I am going. I've checked and I do see that everything is still good on my part. So we're going to go ahead and continue where I left off here. Just give me a second. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and share real quick. All right. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm going to pick up where I left off. Okay. It says this. Look, I'm going to punish the king of Babylon and his land, just as I punished the king of Assyria. So notice that God has been the one that's definitely doing all the punishing when it comes to these two empires that scattered his people, and will restore Israel to its pasture, and it will feed on Carmel and on Bashan and on the hills of Ephraim and in Gilead. Its hunger will be satisfied in those days, and at that time, declares Yahweh, the guilt of Israel will be sought, but there is none, and the sin of Judah, but they will not be found. So notice that once again that Israel of the north and Judah of the south are having their sins cleansed. This is what he's going to do for the north and the south concerning Babylon. For I will forgive those I left behind. So he's going to forgive them, those he left behind, right? The scattered northern whatever. To the land of Merathaim, go up against her and against the inhabitants of Pekod. Now, I looked up what these places are, and these are major cities in Babylon. Massacre and destroy them, declares Yahweh, and do all according to all that I command you. Sounds like something Jesus said, right? 28-29. There is a sound of fugitives and survivors from the land of Babylon. I wonder who these survivors are. Who could they be? To declare in Zion the vengeance of Yahweh our God, the vengeance for his temple. Summon the archers against Babylon and all those who bend the bow and camp all around her. There must not be left her for an escape. Take vengeance on her according to her deeds, according to all that she has done, so to do to her. For against Yahweh she has behaved insolently against the Holy One of Israel, right? It's talking about what Babylon has done. 33-35, last one. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the blessed people of Israel are oppressed, and the people of Judah likewise, for all their captors have seized them. They refuse to let them go free. Their Redeemer is strong. His name is Yahweh of hosts. Surely he will plead their case in order to make peace for the earth, but to cause unrest to the inhabitants of Babylon. A sword against the Chaldees, against Yahweh. Declares Yahweh against the inhabitants of Babylon, against her officials, and against her wise men. God is coming to go ahead and rescue the northern and the southern kingdom from Babylon. So that means from Jeremiah 3 and Jeremiah 50, which is stated 4 times throughout Jeremiah 50. I skipped Jeremiah 51 because I thought that'd be overkill. He's talking about the deliverance of the northern and the southern tribes from Babylon. You can't get around this. That's what he's talking about. And finally, guess who backs it up? The person who came back from the Babylonian captivity, who was delivered, who did live through it. Let's see what he says. Ezra chapter 1, verse 1 through 3. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to accomplish the word of Yahweh fulfilled by the mouth of Jeremiah, pause right there. Everything that we just read about the northern and southern kingdom going through hard times, being scattered by God because of their sins and their rebellion, but yet being prophesied that they're going to go ahead and find their way back from Babylon to Jerusalem, even though Jeremiah acknowledges that they were scattered by Assyria and Babylon. He says that this right here, what's going on in his time, when they were come back in safety by the protection of the king of Persia, Ezra is saying here in his writings that these things that happened are fulfilled by the word of Jeremiah, fulfilled by the prophecy of Jeremiah. What does that mean? That means that Ezra is saying that the northern and the southern kingdom came back to Jerusalem as prophesied by Jeremiah. That's what that means. Yahweh stirred the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he sent the message to all his kingdom, and out of to put a message in writing. Thus saith King Cyrus of Persia, Yahweh, the God of the heavens, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he himself has appointed me to build a house for him in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever among you is from all his people, may his God be with him, and may he go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and may build a house of Yahweh, the God of Israel. He is a God who is in Jerusalem. Would you look at that? You think some northern people are in there? Well, Jeremiah is a prophet, and he said they were. Let's see if there are any northern people in there. The list of returned exiles. Verse 1. Now these were the people of the province who came up from the captivity, exile from Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, carried captive to Babylonia. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own city. Bethel is a northern kingdom area that was, quote, captured from the Canaanites by Ephraim, situated on the borders of Ephraim and Benjamin. It was reputed of great sanctity. We found the ark at Bethel. It was included in Samuel's circuit. It was a home of the schools of the prophets. It was selected by Jeroboam at the southern sanctuary of the calf worship, which is instituted. Thenceforth, its name chiefly occurs in connection with the sins of idolatry. It comes from the Cambridge Bible School and College's entire Bible commentary. Now, what do we find about Bethel? Well, let's go to verse 28. The men of Bethel and Ai, 223. So there it is. We have the northern kingdom being named among those who returned from Babylon. Now, all of a sudden, everything that Jeremiah was saying does make perfect sense now. Really does. What about Nehemiah? He came back with Ezra. Let's see what he says. Nehemiah 7 verse 5. Then my God put into my heart to assemble the nobles, the perfects, and the people who enrolled. I found the book of genealogy, those who first came back, and I found this written upon it. Verse 32. The men of Bethel and Ai, 123. So once again, the northern kingdom came back with the southern kingdom. Now, is there more proof that I could have given in here? Yes, but I did not want to be super exhaustive. I just wanted to give sufficient proof and somewhat exhaustive, but I could have given more. So the reason why I shared that is because now you know Here, let me go ahead and take this off camera. All right, so where we at? Let me see. Wonder why it doesn't show my face anymore. That's interesting. Anyway, so this is why the northern and southern kingdom came back during the Babylonian captivity, which means that they were never scattered abroad during the times of the Maccabees and during the times of the New Testament. That is not how the northern kingdom is talked about. They came back with the south. That is why Jesus said in Matthew 10:5 and 6, don't go to the Samaritans, right? And they're up north, aren't they? Don't go by way of the Gentiles, right? Because they're everywhere around. Just go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And guess what? You read in Luke 9 and 10. You read Matthew 10:5 and 6 and all the rest of them chapters. You read. They said, you know what? We did go and we cast out demons and we did this and we did that and we preached the kingdom to them, to this lost sheep. They did receive the gospel. And Jesus said, you know what? I'm glad that you guys cast out demons and things like that. And I'm glad you're rejoicing, but just be glad that your names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Good job, by the way, though. That's what Jesus said. That's what we have. So the northern kingdom, there were plenty of them in Judah in the south. That is the reason why you could find the woman who is a prophetess, Anna, from the tribe of Asher. What's she doing around in the southern kingdom? She's there because of what God did to her ancestors hundreds of years ago, bringing them back. So the northern kingdom was in the south. Jesus went to someone named Zacchaeus and said, oh, he is one that's lost, but now he's found. And he said, this is an Israelite indeed. Didn't he say that about Zacchaeus, the tax collector? And guess where he was? He was in Jericho. If I looked this up myself, if you look on the map of Jericho, that is within the southern kingdom. Any information will tell you that. And it will show you geographically. That is an issue. So this is why their invisible narrative is not seen in the New Testament. Oh, they were scattered. Well, what do? They came back through Babylon. Oh, they're called Gentiles. Well, why is it that they were never called Gentiles throughout this entire time and they were called lost sheep instead? Well, what? During the Maccabees, they were never called Gentiles. They were called everything else. I've proven that. Then after that, you got Jesus calling them lost sheep. And he makes them distinct from Gentiles. Now, since I'm on this subject, let me go ahead, since I'm already ahead of myself, let me go ahead and back this up even more now that I'm on this point. Because again, the issue is that you have to find your narrative. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Because the issue is that they have to find their narrative in the New Testament. Oh, they were called Israelites. Okay, well, let me show you something here, okay? Please explain this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Once again, this is a little joy chart, something that I made here. Jesus and the disciples and others, Jesus and Paul. You think Jesus may have known the difference between the lost sheep of the house of Israel and Gentiles? Let's see. Matthew 10:5 and 6. Jesus sent out these 12, instructing them, saying, do not go on the road to the Gentiles, and do not enter into the city of the Samaritans, but instead go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So Jesus made a distinction between the Jews, right? The lost sheep of the house of Israel, the Samaritans, and what do you call it here? Hold on. Yep. Yeah, I'm sure like this. So he made a distinction between the three, right? The Gentiles, the Samaritans, and the lost sheep. He made a distinction between the three. You think he knows what he's talking about? Let's see. Matthew 15:24. But he answered and said, I was not sent unto the lost, but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So that's the second time that he uses this title. The same title that we found in the mouth of Jeremiah and also Hosea, who said they were scattered. Matthew 28. See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death to deliver him over to the Gentiles, to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he will be raised on the third day. So again, he knows the difference between the Gentiles and the chief priests and scribes. And once again, even the professing Hebrews will say, yes, those are actual Gentiles. John 4, you worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, because salvation is from the Jews. Now, I could use the logic against him at this point. Well, he only came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but yet salvation is only of the Jews? Oh, now all of a sudden there's no more distinction. Oh, well, he meant the house of Israel. He meant the lost sheep of the house of Israel too. You see how I could go ahead and flip the logic with the flimsy standards there? This is why that type of standard runs against them. Luke 2:25, he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who have authority over them are called benefactors. So he's talking about Gentiles, right? Matthew 6, for all these things do the Gentiles seek, for your heavenly Father knows what you have need of, all these things. So he knows the difference between the Gentiles and you, or in other words, the people he was talking to, which was the Jews, actual Gentiles. John 10:16, and I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I must also bring these too, and they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock and one shepherd. Once again, I showed you earlier that the definition of being lost, according to the prophets and according to Jesus, is not having a sheep. Not having a shepherd. That's what it means to be a lost sheep. That goes against their Hebrew narrative of, well, you got to wake up to your bloodline and your inheritance and this and that. And that's why you're lost. Nope. That's not what Jesus meant. Not what Jeremiah meant. Not what Chronicles meant. Not what Hosea meant. Let's go by the scripture to see what they mean for when they say lost. Lost sheep. You're without a shepherd. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. So if you have Jesus, you're no longer lost. Not, oh, I'm waking up to who I am. I know my inheritance. I know what happened to me. I know my past. I know my language. I know my history. I know my people. No. I know my DNA. I know my bloodline. Nope. That was not what made one lost according to Scripture. So, now that we see all these distinctions that Jesus made with the Gentiles and the Jews and things, how is it that Jesus comes over here in Acts chapter 9 and he talks about Gentiles? But listen to what he says. He says this to Paul, Acts 9:15. But the Lord said to him, go, because this man is my chosen instrument to carry my name before Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel. For I will show him how he must suffer for my name's sake. So Jesus made a distinction between the Gentiles, kings, and the sons of Israel, the children of Israel. And yet, my opponents, like Darash and all the rest of those guys, will look at that verse and say, oh, that Gentiles, that's really talking about Israelites. Well, what's the problem? One, why didn't he call them lost sheep? Well, what? He said it twice in the Gospels. He made all these distinctions between the Gentiles and being crucified, the Gentiles and how they lord it over them, the Gentiles and how they seek all these things. He made all those distinctions with the Gentiles. Now over here, he says, you know what? Paul, I'm going to send you to Gentiles and the kings and the sons of Israel, the children of Israel. But he never gives a back context to it. That's an issue. So therefore, these are actual Gentiles. That's an issue. you don't believe that, then you're going to have to explain Matthew 10, 5, and 6. He made a distinction between the Gentiles, Samaritans, and the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He made a distinction between the lost sheep of the house of Israel and the Jews, whose salvation is up. You know why he said that? He was talking to a Samaritan. We know that the Samaritans built their own rival kingdom, and they had to send, the South had to send a priest up there to the North to teach them how to worship because they didn't know what the heck they were doing. They didn't know how they were worshiping. We know all these things. So that's why Jesus says, you don't know what you worship, but we know what we worship. Salvation is down here in the Southern Kingdom. You know, y'all lost it. That's what he meant when he said that. Had nothing to do with whatever the professing Hebrews say. Well, salvation is only for Israel. The context is not there. I just showed you the context right now as to why Jesus said that. I can demonstrate and go back in the 1st and 2nd Kings and show why Jesus said that. They can't do that. That is why they're wrong. It is not enough to take some kind of conclusion that you like and then just read it into the context. You can't do that. If you could, then that means that you're going to go ahead and make the Bible just say just about anything. So in other words, Darash and the rest of the gang, you guys are wrong. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and read all the rest of these because, the time really is kind of burning. And I really went well over my time to just get in the background of this stuff. So what I'm going to do is, for homework, you guys could read Acts 22, the whole chapter, Acts 26, 15 through 23. And you can ask yourself, why is Jesus being this distinctual about the Gentiles, but he's not giving any kind of background hint of these Gentiles being Israelites? Why is he not doing that? They're doing the opposite. If you see your fellow Jews ripping their clothes because you tell them this testimony that Jesus sent you to the Gentiles to give them salvation, and you see your fellow Jews ripping their clothes saying, oh my gosh, you should be cast off of the earth, and you look up that word earth, and it's actually Gi, which means land, cast off the land of Israel. That's Paul's perfect opportunity to say, hey, why are you doing this? You already know they're your own people. You're going to be like that toward your own people? They're lost sheep. That's the only difference between you and them. He never said that. Perfect opportunity to say it, but he never said it. That's an issue. This is why their narrative is not there. So, now that you understand both sides of where they're coming from, now all you got to do is just simply listen to them and see what it is they're really kind of saying here. We're going to go to 46:18. Okay, so we're going to go to 46:18. All right. I'm going to go to 46:18. So now that you know the background of what happened to the Northern Kingdom, now all you got to do is just see what they say. Oh, wait a minute. Everyone listen to what this guy is about to give you. Google the book that you're about to be revealed. This guy right here is telling us that he's reading this book that you're about to see. And he's saying that this book showed him who the Gentiles are. Let's see what this book is.
Else, right? Y'all need to start reading. Okay, this is a book called The Post-Captivity Names of Israel. It's not just Greek. We were scattered abroad for a long time and began to call ourselves after the names of where we were. Did not Christ come for those people? I got one more scripture I'd like to respond, all right, Surreal? Because y'all brothers did say a lot. So there is a lot to unpack. You could give me that grace, brother?
Let's go ahead and check out this book. Okay, check out this book. So let's see here. And I'm going to make this a full screen because I want you guys to see this. This is a book that he is using. All right. Let me see right here. Okay. All right, good. This book right here. He's using a book called The Post-Captivity Names of Israel, as he said. January 1st, 1989, right? Now, this guy who wrote it is named William Pascoe Gord. William Pascoe Gord. This is an author who wrote it. But you know what? Let's find out about the author. Okay? Now, what I'm about to reveal to you might make you extremely angry. But, let's just do it anyway. All right, here it is. I'm going to read this. This comes from Ranger Book Reviews. It says, "Not for the novice, an enjoyable historical document best appreciated by those who know this topic." Now, there's a reason why this guy's a little biased, and we're about to find out right now. It says, "The Post-Captivity Names of Israel was originally published in 1934 and has been released by artists and publishers, specialists in the publication of books about the lost tribes of Israel. The author, Reverend William Pascoe Gord, was a Methodist minister and a British Israelite, i.e., one who promoted the idea that the British people, comprising those who were descendants from Celts, Saxons, Normans, Danes, and Druids, whom the author believes were Greeks, and further back, the Scythians and the descendants of the 10 are the descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. If you are not aware of the large amount of classical research that went into British Israelism studies in the 19th century, you may find yourself lost about a third of the way into this. I happen to be into this kind of research, although I don't exactly embrace the theory. Gord seems to be focused mainly on the Scythians and their migrations, as well as the evolution of ethnic names from the house of Isaac and the house of Omri, names applied to Israel during the Assyrian captivity, to Sakai, Kumarians, Cimmerians, not Conans, although now that I think of it, Robert E. Howard was Jewish, to Scythians, to Goths, etc. Actually, at one point, the author runs the whole gamut of theories about the lost tribes past us, including Iberians, Spanish and Portuguese, Greeks, specifically Spartans, and descendants from the tribe of Dan. I actually accept this possibility based on Jewish sources. And even the Japanese, there's a whole other body of theories on this idea. None of them, and even the Japanese, there is a whole other body of theories on this idea. None of them are DNA supported. It's quite a lot to digest for such a short book. If you are into this research, this book is well worth adding to your collection, although not as convincingly written as others, but for the general reader, and especially those Christians who are young in the Lord, but eager to read anything about the lost tribes, I recommend passing this one by. He rates it 3 out of 5. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is that he's picking up a book from the white version of the Black Hebrew Israelites and saying, hey, this book shows who the Black Hebrew Israelites are. But the guy that wrote the book ended up saying that this book is showing that his people are the Israelites, specifically the Scythians and everybody. And yet, I'm presuming that he has not read this whole book. But if he has read this whole book, then he is being highly hypocritical and deceptive, saying that blacks are the Hebrews. But he's holding a book that's teaching you that whites are the Hebrews. Now, of course, both of them are just flat out wrong because they're crazy theories. But you can't do that. You can't sit up in a You can't sit up in a spot and say, hey, y'all, I want y'all to read something. And yet the thing that you're showing me is showing me that, A, white people are the Hebrew Israelites. And yet you're holding a book that say the black people are the Hebrew Israelites. And you're saying that book says what you're saying? No, that's messed up. That's crazy. That's wrong. And you can't do that. Let's go further on. I'm going to show y'all some more stuff. This was an old blog that I basically re-uploaded to my brand new Substack. Substack is where I've done my most recent writings as of this year. Isaiah 11, Isaiah 37, Isaiah 60, Isaiah 66, all that stuff I've written. But I've uploaded a oldie but a goodie. I advise you to look at this right here, what I did back in 2019. I called it Rip Off Theology, Alphabet Israelite Camps are British Israel Theology Cults. And then from there, I basically went side by side. You can see. Look at these two men. Same thing. They are reverse engineering the writings from the 19th century British Israelites who claim to be Israelites. And they're simply just saying, oh, no, that's us. Now, look, this is a book that you can get for free. You can download it right now. And basically, it's like a plagiarized breakdown of British Israelism adapted by Bivens. It's called British Israel Bible Notes. All right. These are little things that I made personally. But this is what I'm talking about. Now, look at this. Do you see that right there? Gentilized Israelites. In other words, he's saying Hellenized Israelites. But yet, they decided to push it extra to say Gentilized Israelites. Does this sound familiar to you? This was during the 1800s. Once again, Gentilized Israelites. Gentilized Israelites. The mission of our church is a resuscitated Christendom, a Hebrew church and nation, a subjugated world. A subjugated world? Sounds familiar, right? The pretensions of Rome and the valued theories of higher critics are blown into the paradise of fools when an Israelite yet Gentilized nation witnesses to the sons and daughters of men God's immutable faithfulness to the word that has gone out of his mouth, to the promises which are yea and amen in the sons of his love. British Israel stuff. Long before the black Hebrew Israelites, you had white Hebrew Israelites. This stuff I came up with in 2019, rummaging through all this stuff I found. The elect of God of the brethren of Paul were Scythians, Britons, whom God called into his kingdom and glory. A letter which was endorsed by all the leading Scots of Bruce's time declared that they were the Scythians. So, this is another book. Did they go ahead and show all this crazy stuff? Matter of fact, I will go ahead and put this as a link in the chat. Anyone to go ahead and show? Anyone. There you go. I just put that in the chat. Please check out all the rest of my stuff. And if you want to read my stuff 100% free, the full versions of it, all you have to do is subscribe to Substack like you do to YouTube, and it's absolutely free. So, all right. Anyway, I think I'll go ahead and, look at this. So, once again, I went down somewhat of a rabbit hole based on the book that this gentleman wanted us to look at. So what do you think? That was the book that he said, hey, y'all brothers need to read. Really? let's go ahead and continue to see what else he says. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and take it back, and we're going to put it at 48 minutes. This is the next spot I want everyone to take a look at and tell me what y'all think. This is 48 minutes. Here we go. 46 minutes. I'm sorry, 46:18. Okay. All right, here we go. And okay. Here we go. The soul of every human being, a Jew or a Greek non-Israelite, yes or no?
I completely disagree emphatically. That was horrible. So the Jew first would be the people within the land when that is taking place, right? Judeans. Okay? Is there a remnant of the northern kingdom? Yes, a very small remnant. You can see that within the Gospels. You see the woman from Asher. You understand? She would have been labeled a Judean. So when it says the Jew.
Now, what did we just get done saying? That all of a sudden, you see that the northern people were in the southern kingdom.
First, that's why he said, I came to my own first.
And where were they? According to him and according to the Bible, they were in Judea. They weren't scattered everywhere like he says. So now he's giving you two narratives out of his mouth. You can't be saying two things and say you're right. You got to stick to your narrative.
The book of John, chapter 1. So this right here is talking about Israelites and also the Gentiles. Now, you said that word Gentile just for clarity. I'm going to look it up myself in the Textus Receptus, right? Because that's a manuscript I hold authoritative. So in
it's Greek. It doesn't say Gentile in the Textus Receptus. It says Helen.
Again, I'm glad he pointed that out, because notice my NET said first to the Jew and then to the Greek. And I'm gonna right. And again, I'm gonna try to point to a certain part of my question.
1 second, brother.
Okay.
I was patient because you're using. First of all, let me teach you something, Surreal. And a lot of people don't understand this.
Let you teach me something. Okay.
Right, and I don't mean this by any disrespect. The Strong's Concordance is a numbering system.
Who doesn't know that? I've been doing this since 2009. I don't use Strong's.
Let me finish. That's what it is. The Thayer's lexicon, even though I'm not saying that it's horrible, also has a lot of commentary in it. That's
bullcrap.
What it has in it. Commentary. Let's go to somewhere. This is why I wish I could have seen you. Y'all could have seen my screen. Okay? If you want me, I could go to the basement. That's cool. Right here. Let's go right here, right? Let's go here first.
What you pulling up?
I'm pulling up.
At this point, I want everyone to pay attention, because this is where it gets into some lexical stuff. So now we're going to see a difference between our sources. I want to show you how his source actually confirms mine, because you can't use our tools against us. That doesn't work.
1 second. Here it goes right here. This is a Greek and English lexicon of the New Testament and early Christian literature, volume 1 by Walter Bears. Now, if you look this up, look at that. Look at that. Now, if you look this up, my good brother, this right here is authoritative. This is authoritative over a Thayer's lexicon or over a Strong's Concordance. Let's see what it says for Helen. A man of Greek language and culture. 2, in broader sense, all persons who came under the influence of Greek pagan culture. So you could do this because you're helping me. That's what you don't realize. You're helping my position, because what it's saying here, to the Jew first, because unto them was committed the oracles of God. That's in chapter 3. So it's to the Jew first, just like it says in Zechariah, the tents of Judah. shall rise first. That's the Judeans. To the Jew first, and also the Gentile or the Greek. It's helping me, brother.
Again, there's a certain part of my question. So there's an issue. Did you notice that what he used, it just said that, those who are people who just took on the culture and the customs and things like that of the Greeks. And that's what it says for that part of the definition that says Greek. From there, he would say, well, it's true that the Jews took on the culture and custom of the Greeks. So because the Jews took on the culture and the custom of the Greeks, I'm going to reason from that definition in Byers that every time I see the word Greek in the New Testament, I'm going to say that those were Israelites, or is a strong possibility they are Israelites. But what's the problem? The problem is that when you look up, when it says for when the Israelites did this, when the Israelites took on the cultures and the customs of the Greeks, they were not called Greeks, were they? And he knows this. What were they called? They were called Grecians. And the Greeks were people that were called Gentile Greeks. The word Greek and Grecian are both in the New Testament distinctly from each other, just like they are in the lexicons. That's the problem. So again, you have to demonstrate what you believe by going into scripture and showing us somewhere where the word Greek is used and is being applied to Israelites. So far, he cannot point to not one verse, not one chapter in the New Testament that does this. Why? Because every time you look at the word Greek, it's either talking about actual Greeks or it's a word used synonymously for non-Israelites. And every time you look at any Jews that are taking on Greek customs and culture, they're always called Grecians. Just like an American is a native of America, and an Americanist is someone who's not native, but they take on the culture and customs of America. You can look up the term Americanist. It actually exists. Just like a Hellenist is not a Hellen. So a Grecian is not a Greek. That is an issue. You know what? And there's one other thing I want to do. I was asked a question. Hey, Matt, it says here Jew and Greek, but you're saying, Matt, that the word there Greek simply just means everybody else. And they asked me, Matt, how do you know that the word Greek there just means everybody else? How do you know that Paul is using it that way? Well, I already told them in the New Testament that there are ways that they use that, just like I did with Romans 2, showing that he said every soul of man, right, who does not do righteousness, they're going to go out and suffer. First to the Jew, then to the Greek. We know every soul of man is not a Greek. Therefore, he's using it in a way to say everybody else. This is why other English translations just say Gentiles. But you know what? I'm going to go into history. I'm going to show my stuff contextually to show that this phrase was used the same way outside of the Bible. And again, this is another way that you could strongly show that when it says Gentile, they mean Gentile. And I'm going to be wrapping up real soon, real quick, because we're about to approach the 2-hour mark. So let me go ahead and get this and share my screen real quick. There we go. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's flip that there. Okay, that's good. And let's share the screen again. This is one of my favorite Bible tools. This is called the Vocabulary of the Greek New Testament. What it is is basically back in 1925, people found all these manuscripts that had all these Greek words, but they were Greek words that were used secularly. They found them on receipts, notices, registers, eviction notices. They found these Greek words. They basically found all these receipts of these manuscripts that were used for like notaries and passes and stuff, right? And they compared the way that these words were being used with these same words that were being used in the Bible, including certain phrases like Jew and Greek. So let's see if this phrase Jew and Greek, i.e., Jews and everybody else, is used that way outside the Bible, and to show that I'm not crazy. It's what it says. In the ordinance of Eudrentres, all non-Egyptian soldiers, whether Macedonians, Cretians, Persians, etc., end quote. The editors compare the opposition between Greeks and Egyptians later in the same decree. This illustrates excellently the familiar antithesis between Jews and Greeks, so pronounced in Mark 7:26, to which an exact parallel is quoted below. Explanation. The editors of the VGNT interpret that this text here refers to all non-Egyptian soldiers, whether they're Macedonians, Cretians, Grecians, and so on. The comparison is drawn between Greeks and Egyptians in the same decree, highlighting the contrast between these two groups. The significance of this explanation in the VGNT is that it helps to illustrate a common contrast between Jews and Greeks, i.e., non-Jewish people who were predominantly Greek-speaking, that is frequently mentioned in the New Testament. For example, this opposition between Jews and Greeks can be observed in Mark 7:26. The book provides an exact parallel from another text to further support this observation. In summary, the entry in the VGNT sheds light on the meaning and usage of the Greek word there in ancient writings and its relevance to the contrast between Jews and non-Jewish Greek speakers, which is often mentioned in the New Testament. J. H. Moulton and G. Milligan, The Vocabulary of the Greek New Testament. In other words, when it says first to the Jew and then to the Greek, it really does mean first to the Jew and everybody else. Just like the Egyptians did it when they said first to the Egyptian and then to the Greek, when they meant just everybody else, i.e. Macedonians, Persians, and everybody else. So it really is talking about everyone else. It is not talking about northern tribes and things like that. No. According to the historical narrative, according to the context, and according to actual lexical sources, just like he likes to pull out Bowers and, what he ended up pulling out, which affirmed my Thayers. Well, here it is. I pulled out a source. Maybe perhaps he could find a source that says the opposite. I highly doubt it. So, I say all this to say, even though I didn't get through everything, I know I didn't get through everything, maybe next time, we can cover the rest of the half of it when the rest of my gang gets here, because I tried to go ahead and get them to jump on. But obviously they were a little busy. I understand. So I decided to do it anyway without them. If they want to go ahead and kind of finish where I left off, then we can all do it together. But the reason why I say this is because of one thing. I did this entire video for one thing, to show that when you look at Gentiles in the New Testament, it's actually talking about Gentiles. When you look at Greeks in the New Testament, it's actually talking about Greeks. This means that when salvation went to Cornelius and the Roman jailer in Acts 16, and Clement, whose name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and first to the Jew and then to the Greek, and salvation going to all people, Titus 2:11, like all of a sudden, for God so loved the world. That means that when they said world, they meant the whole world. That means when they said Greek, they meant Greeks. When they said Gentiles, they meant Gentiles. That's what that means. And because it means that salvation is for everyone. It's for everyone. And that is something that professing Hebrews will have to go ahead and accept. Matter of fact, let me show you something right here. Let's do extra credit. I said I was going to go on and stop, but let's do extra credit because, again, I didn't get through everything. But I just wanted to show this. Let me go ahead somewhere here. Look at this. I believe this is Easton's Bible Dictionary. Let me see. Yeah, Illustrated Bible Dictionary, Easton. Greek, found only in the New Testament, where a distinction is observed between Greek and Grecian. The former, 1, a Greek by race, 2, a Gentile as opposed to a Jew. The latter meaning properly one who speaks Greek is a foreign Jew opposed to a home Jew who dwelt in Palestine. The word Grecians in Acts 11 and 20 should be Greeks, denoting the heathen Greeks of that city, as rendered in the Revised Version according to the reading in the best manuscripts, Hellenese. Also, I want to go to Romans 11. Look at this. My good brother tried to say that, the whole book of Romans is written to the Israelites. And so again, I put him to the same test and standard that I said in the video that you can watch. If what you say is true, there should be certain things I should never find in the New Testament. This is one of them. So let's go down here to 14. Let's see. Now look at this. Verse 12. And if their trespass means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their fullness mean? Notice that fullness and Gentiles is in the same verse here. Now, these are actual Gentiles. Now, how do I know this? Look at next verse. Now, I am speaking to you Gentiles. Therefore, inasmuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I promote my ministry. If somehow I may provoke my people to jealousy and save some of them, for if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean of the life from the dead? Well, wait a minute. Aren't these Gentiles here also your people, since they're just lost? Right? They're also your people. The lost sheep of the house of Israel, right? They're still the house of Israel, right? Well, if that's the case, why in the world is Paul speaking distinctly here? Verse 14, if somehow I may provoke my people to jealousy and save some of them. Provoke who? The people who are jealous of the Gentiles coming in. Look at what he said earlier. I say then, they did not stumble so as they fall, did they? May it never be. By their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles in order to provoke them to jealousy. So the them there are the unbelieving Jews who are jealous of what Gentiles coming on into the faith. And yet, Paul is calling these Jews here his people. But these Gentiles here, according to the professing Hebrews, they're Paul's people too. But Paul does not call these Gentiles his people. He calls the jealous Jews who are jealous of the Gentiles, he calls them his people. Why is that distinction there? Why? This narrative should not be if your narrative is true. I should not find the opposite if what you say is true. And after that, it gets worse. Let me show you. Something I was looking for here. I'm going to find it. You know what? Here, I'll just do this. Look at this. Matter of fact, make sure that it is a literal version, right? Don't want no, you know. Now, this is the Young's literal version. What the literal Greek says, it says, if by any means I shall arouse to jealousy mine own flesh and save some of them. Now, to go ahead and glaze that out just a little bit more easier for you to understand, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. Who are of his flesh? Well, his fellow Jews. Well, what about the Gentiles? Aren't they of his flesh as well? DNA, blood type, all that. Aren't they of his flesh as well? He's talking about these unbelieving Jews who are of his flesh, and he wants to provoke them and make them jealous. And yet, he's not talking about the Gentiles like this. He's only talking about the Jews who are of his flesh, the Jews who are his people. So, I can do these distinctions all day. So, when it talks about the Jews and the Gentiles, it literally means the Jews and the Gentiles. I mean, look at this. He literally goes back and forth. He literally goes back and forth. Who will render unto any man, or every man according to his deeds, right? First to the Jew, then also of the Gentile. He just does it over and over. There's no respect to persons in God. He says, for as many as have sinned without the law, that's the Gentiles, right? Then they're going to perish without the law. As many as have sinned in the law, that's the Jews, they'll be judged by the law. For the hearers of the law will be justified before God, but the doers of the law, for the hearers of the law will not be justified before God, but the doers of the law will be justified. Who are those? That's the Jews who does the law and will be justified. You know, the old covenant. For when the Gentiles, now he's talking about the Gentiles, which have not the law, unlike these people who do have it and they're trying to do it to be justified, do by nature the things contained in the law, having it, see, once again, the only type of laws that can be done by your very nature is the moral laws, the type of things that are written on your conscience, not to do and what to do. So you can see he goes back and forth and back and forth. He talks about some parts for the Jews, talks about some parts for the Gentiles. He does it back and forth. There are two peoples in the Roman church, the Jews who were expelled from Rome, and after that they later returned. And you can look at that within the New Testament and especially historical sources. And then by the time they get back into Rome, the return to the Roman church, they found it a bit more Gentile than usual. Why? Because the gospel does not stop. Paul continued to preach to the Gentiles, and he crammed them into the Roman church. Paul was told by Jesus that he would go ahead and be a light to the Gentiles. He had to put them somewhere. So now you see that you have Jews and Gentiles in the Roman church. That's why you have stuff like Romans 14. One believes that he may eat all things, another who is weak and he only eats herbs. One man esteems one day above another, the other man esteems every day alike. It goes on and on. Jews and Gentiles. First to the Jew, then to the Greek. You go to Romans 10, it's the same thing. Pulls out verses and slaps them toward the Gentiles. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek, for the same is the Lord over all, and rich to all that call upon him. So notice that. He's saying that there's no difference between them. Not because they're secretly the same people. No. He says there's no difference because in the new covenant, once you're saved and you're in Christ and you're in the gospel and you call on Jesus, there's no difference anymore. You're both the same. That's something that he was trying to get the church in Rome to understand. That's it. And the whole book of Romans shows that. So once again, I only got through half of what I wanted to say, but hopefully this will be sufficient enough to show that there really is actual Gentiles and actual Jews. I didn't even get to Cornelius. I didn't get to none of that stuff. But maybe we'll go and cover it next time. All right. Other than that, grace and peace, everybody. And we'll, next time we'll just go ahead and finish off the rest of the video because we're halfway through. All right. So again, salvation is for everyone. It always has been, always will be. Whatever happened to the northern tribe, they came back into the south, according to Hosea, Jeremiah, affirmed by Ezra, seen in the Gospels of Jesus, acknowledged by Jesus. And that is the narrative of the northern tribes. Therefore, there's no such thing as a northern tribe Israelite called a Gentile in the New Testament. There just isn't. There are made distinctions within the prophets. There are made distinctions between First and Second Maccabees, and there are made distinctions in the Gospels in Jesus and Paul and everybody else. Other than that, peace and blessings, everybody. And again, I think this is a reason why that video remains unlisted by the host. Because if you actually watch it, you'll start to notice that this narrative falls apart. And if Jesus really did die for everyone and everyone could come on into salvation, what does that do for the supposed Gentiles in the kingdom being slaves? That's also false as well. Maybe we'll get to that next time. Peace and blessings. By the way, you can check out my most recent writings, which are wonderful, by the way. Use them for arguments if you like. firstcentury.substack.com. And email me at ssreal@gmail.com if you want any resources. God bless you guys.